The new Realme X3 SuperZoom comes with some great specs that on paper makes it one of the best phones under 30k. But can it take on last year's flagship killer, the OnePlus 7T? Well, let's find out in today's video. Hey guys, Omar here from C4E Tech, and if you do end up finding this video useful, then please consider subscribing and turning on notifications by hitting that bell icon. Let's now get started. Despite both phones sporting the same glass sandwich build, we have two very different design philosophies here. The OnePlus 7T is thinner and lighter, comes protected by Corning's Gorilla Glass 5 on both sides, and has this distinctive circular camera cutout to the back along with a subtle gradient finish. On the other hand, the Realme X3 SuperZoom has a much bigger overall footprint, a 400 mAh bigger battery, but the design and finish, at least on the Glacier Blue variant here, it's typical Realme, something we have seen a lot before and thus in my eyes looks kinda boring. Now design is a matter of personal choice, but in terms of functionality, the OnePlus 7T has two more aces up its sleeve. The alert slider above the power button as well as day-to-day water resistance. Both useful features that gives OnePlus the edge in terms of build. Display-wise, these two couldn't be more different. On one side, the OnePlus 7T comes with a smaller 6.55-inch Fluid AMOLED panel with a 90Hz refresh rate and a tiny water drop notch up top. The X3 SuperZoom sports a marginally bigger 6.6-inch IPS panel with a higher 120Hz refresh rate and a cutout to the left for the double selfie cameras. So when it comes to displays, the only similarity between them is that they are both Full HD Plus panels covered by Corning's Gorilla Glass 5. But that's right where it ends. The OnePlus 7T has thinner bezels, especially a smaller chin, much more vivid colors with the characteristic inky blacks and excellent contrast that AMOLED panels bring. The X3 SuperZoom on the other hand is ever so slightly faster when it comes to scrolling around the UI thanks to that higher refresh rate. Now personally on a daily basis, I'd prefer the punchier colors of the AMOLED since 90 and 120Hz can get hard to distinguish unless we are gaming. Speaking of gaming, let's take a look at the internals. We have last year's flagship Snapdragon 855 Plus on both devices, so performance here is top notch. Both these phones absolutely fly through day-to-day tasks like opening up apps or scrolling through a Twitter feed. So no complaints on that regard. When it comes to gaming, we have the same Adreno 640 GPU on both phones, and as expected from a top-of-the-line GPU, they were able to handle games like PUBG and Call of Duty Mobile without even breaking a sweat. Now, when we switched over to higher refresh rate games like Alto's Odyssey and Ace Force Combat Evolved, we felt like the X3 SuperZoom had the tiniest of advantages. It's very difficult to show on camera, but when we did a quick pan on Ace Force or wanted to execute a last second jump on Alto's Odyssey, it felt smoother and more responsive on the X3 SuperZoom. Wrapping up the other internal specs, we have 8 gigs of RAM and 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 3.0 storage on both phones. The Realme X3 SuperZoom though does offer a higher 12 gig RAM variant. There's no micro SD card slot on either device, so no room for storage expansion down the line. Summing up the performance section, I'd give this one to the Realme X3 SuperZoom. That 120Hz screen does give a competitive advantage in games that support it. Next up, let's talk battery life. The 4200 mAh unit on the Realme X3 SuperZoom is about 10% larger compared to the 3800 mAh one on the OnePlus 7T. That being said, the X3 SuperZoom does have a slightly bigger screen and it runs at a higher refresh rate. So in real life, the difference in battery life is about 5 to 8%. With that in mind, both these phones can easily last us through a day of moderate to heavy usage. And if we do run out of charge, both phones come with proprietary 30-watt fast charging solutions. The 7T has its own Warp Charge 30T, while the X3 SuperZoom comes with Realme's Dash Charge technology. In terms of speed, they're both pretty close. OnePlus claims 68% in 30 minutes and full charge in an hour, while Realme says they can do 70% in half an hour and a full charge in 55 minutes. So eventually it comes down to battery capacity and the X3 SuperZoom wins this round. Now, we have been talking about hardware for a while now, so let's change tracks and talk about the software experience here. We have Oxygen OS 10 on the OnePlus 7T going up against Realme UI on the X3 SuperZoom, both based off of Android 10. Now, we all know what Realme UI is about. We have all the features and functionality of ColorOS 7 in a more stock Android-ish skin. On the other hand, Oxygen OS is as close to bone stock Android as you can get, with a few extra functionality thrown into the mix. Now me personally, I've always been a fan of Oxygen OS. Love the smooth, fluid experience it brings to OnePlus phones, so I would go with the 70 here. But then again, software is a personal choice, so feel free to pick whichever one ticks all your boxes. Taking a look at the sunrise, we have an in-display fingerprint scanner under the AMOLED panel on the OnePlus 7T. It's one of the fastest in its class, but it's still beaten by the side-mounted capacitive scanner on the X3 SuperZoom. We also have face unlock on both phones, and that seems to work as expected. Both phones lack a headphone jack, but as far as sound via the loudspeaker goes, the stereo setup on the OnePlus 7T sounds a whole lot better than the single downward firing one on the Realme X3 SuperZoom. And wrapping up the list for OnePlus, we also get the alert slider and day-to-day water resistance on the 7T. Finally, it's time to talk cameras. We have the 64-megapixel Samsung GW1 from the Realme X3 SuperZoom going up against the 48-megapixel Sony IMX586 sensor on the OnePlus 7T. As expected, both phones do really well in bright light. We have sharp photos with good dynamic range. Now the Realme does take 16 megapixel photos by default compared to 12 megapixel ones on the OnePlus 7T, but it's really hard to tell them apart in terms of detail. One thing that we did consistently notice is that the OnePlus 7T tends to go for more saturated colors compared to the ones on the X3 SuperZoom. Taking a look at full resolution images. Now with the 7D we had to go into Pro mode to be able to take full 48 megapixel resolution images, and honestly what surprised us the most here was that the 7D had trouble with the dynamic range, often overexposing the sky, while the X3 SuperZoom did pretty well in that regard. The detail levels though remained pretty similar for the most part. Now the situation is completely changed under low light. Despite having Nightscape 4.0 on board, the X3 SuperZoom comes out with blurrier pictures under dark conditions. The IMX586 sensor coupled with optical image stabilization and a wide f1.6 aperture lens performs much better here compared to the X3 SuperZoom and its narrower f1.8 lens. The colors are much better on the OnePlus 7T. And we do see a lot of noise creep into the images of the X3 SuperZoom at times, making images even unusable. Now, to be fair, all these images were taken handheld, and the X3 SuperZoom does support Starry Night as well as a Pro Night mode, but both of these require the phone to be mounted on a tripod or to be kept still. Now, the reason that this device is called the X3 SuperZoom is because of this 8-megapixel periscope zoom lens. It comes with optical image stabilization and can go up to 5x optical zoom and a whopping 60x digital zoom. The OnePlus 7T on the other hand has a higher 12-megapixel camera that can do up to 2x optical zoom. Now here's a comparison of both at 2x. Obviously, the 7T does better here in terms of sharpness. At 5x though, the tables are turned as we see that the Realme X3 SuperZoom does better. Kinda expected since this 8-megapixel snapper is supposed to offer 5x optical zoom. And even at 10x, the X3 SuperZoom continues to dominate with crisper looking shots. Now we couldn't have comparative shots up to 60x since 10x is the maximum the OnePlus 7T can go to. Jumping ship to the ultra-wides, we can clearly see the 16-megapixel shooter from 7T outdoing the 8-megapixel one on the Realme X3 SuperZoom in terms of details. But it does feel a bit lacking in terms of dynamic range. Take for example this picture of the tree. The details have been crushed on the OnePlus 7T, while the X3 SuperZoom has managed to maintain it quite well. Now we do have a dedicated 2-megapixel macro camera in here, while the 7T uses software trickery to take ultra macro images. And honestly, take a look at the grass. The snap from the OnePlus comes out looking way better. Not only does it have sharper edges, the one from the X3 SuperZoom looks like the colors have been kinda washed out. Let's quickly take a look at the selfies. Compared to the 32-megapixel IMX sensor on the X3 SuperZoom, the OnePlus 7T with its 16-megapixel camera actually does better with regard to details. Both phones preserve natural-looking skin tones, but in my eye, the snaps from the Realme X3 SuperZoom ended up looking a little soft. Now, one thing that the 7T can't really compete with is the ultra-wide selfies taken by the 8-megapixel snapper on the X3 SuperZoom. Now, when it comes to video capture, we can go up to 4K 60 frames per second on both devices. We have crisp looking footage from both phones, but personally, I prefer the one from the OnePlus 7T just a bit more. Since we get those punchier colors, both phones can use aggressive EIS to smoothen out shakes in the footage. OnePlus calls this super stable, while Realme has ultra steady and max ultra steady, which uses the primary or the ultra wide sensor to capture stabilized footage. As far as slow motion goes, we do have the option to capture 960 frames per second slow-mo at HD resolution on the X3 SuperZoom, while the OnePlus 70 is limited to only 480 frames per second at HD resolution. So while the Realme X3 SuperZoom has a very competent set of cameras that ends up matching the OnePlus 70 on some occasions and even outperforming it when it comes to zooming in, I do feel that the 70 wins the overall camera round for being just better in image and video quality. That being said, the X3 SuperZoom does have a ton of features and they are fun to play around with. So finally, we come down to the price. The OnePlus 70 is currently available from 34,999 rupees, while the X3 SuperZoom is gonna start at 27,999 rupees. So 7,000 rupees cheaper than the OnePlus. Now, if you're a fan of that AMOLED panel and you really like the dual stereo speakers, the alert slider, and all the OnePlus exclusive software tweaks that Oxygen OS brings with it, then the OnePlus 70 at 35K makes more sense than getting the new OnePlus 8. However, if you're looking for the most bang for the buck phone that can give a flagship grade experience without burning a hole in your pocket, then the Realme X3 SuperZoom is worth looking into. It's got a 120Hz display that gamers would love, a bigger battery, slightly faster wired charging, and of course that periscope camera that can really take some amazing pictures even at 10x magnification. So that's been my 2 cents. Now I want to know, what do you guys think? Do you prefer the Realme X3 SuperZoom or the OnePlus 70? Let us know by dropping a hashtag Realme or a hashtag OnePlus in the comments below. And as always, like, share, subscribe and all that. And oh, turn on notifications by hitting that bell icon if you haven't yet. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, guys. Have a good one. Cheers.